Anything else I got going? I think that's it. All right. Well, today we're going to uh, get back into the Word here, but last week we looked at a couple disciples, and in fact, as I was thinking about that, they're kind of like Thomas. Thomas wrestled with doubt, and he struggled with doubt. And we see these two disciples that we talked about on the road to Emmaus, where they didn't realize that Jesus had rose again. They were struggling, and Jesus met them with grace, and we're reminded that Jesus doesn't turn away from us when we struggle with our unbelief. Aren't you glad that He's still, even when we struggle and we miss things, and God's trying to speak to us, and He's right there, and we don't see Him, and yet He still keeps coming back, and He doesn't shame us. He doesn't just give us a hard time. He is always there with grace, and I love that. In fact, He invites us to come closer to Him, to see His love, and to trust Him, and to have that communion with Him. And this morning we're going to look at another disciple who had his own crisis, not of doubt, but of failure. How many times are you glad that God doesn't just give up on us when we fail? I have failed so many times, and God just He says, "Welcome back." Oh, you know what? While I've got a second here, I'm going to ask you to just share your testimony real quick. What happened? What happened this week?
Well, I went to see the surgeon, and he released me, told me to come back in about a year, and he said in 2 weeks you can start weight bearing on that leg. He said I usually don't even remove the staples until you're 6 weeks into it, but he told me I can start walking in 6 weeks. Isn't that good?
I love a good testimony. I love it when God just kind of shows off and just says, "Hey, look what I can do." All right. So, again, we're looking this morning at Peter, and we know that he made some bold promises. He vowed that he wouldn't even he wouldn't forsake him, even if everybody else did. And yet, on the night of Jesus' betrayal, Peter denied him not once but 3 times. And can you imagine the weight that had to bear on him, on Peter's heart? I mean, after all the miracles that he had witnessed, after walking on water, after declaring to Jesus that he was the Messiah, at that moment of crisis, Peter failed. And maybe, and well, I guarantee you, every one of us know that feeling. We know that feeling of, man, I blew it. I messed up so bad. And, there's been moments that we've fallen short where fear or shame or regret has made us wonder if God could even use us anymore. Because of what I've done, can God even use me? Because I've messed up so bad. I don't know how God could even use me. Maybe you're asking yourself that question, is my failure too great for God's grace? Well, the good news is that Jesus doesn't leave us in our failures. And we're going to see this morning how Jesus goes after Peter, not to condemn him, but to restore him. By the shores of the Sea of Galilee, the very place where Peter was first called to follow him, Jesus extends the invitation once again to follow me. And in this story of grace, it's the grace that redeems, it's a love that restores, it's a purpose that remains even after our failures. And sometimes I know I've wondered, again, does God still have a place for me? Is there something that I can do, even though I've messed up so bad, even though I've done things that I shouldn't do? Is God? And if you've ever felt that way, if you felt unworthy of His calling, then today this message is for you. Because Jesus isn't finished with you yet. We're going to look at John chapter 21 and see what happens when the risen Christ meets Peter at his moment of shame and restores him to a life of love and purpose. In John chapter 21, starting with verse 1, it says, "After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias in the way that he showed himself, and in this way he showed himself. Simon Peter, Thomas called twin, Nathanael of Cana and Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, the two sons of his disciples were together. And Simon Peter said to them, 'I'm going fishing.' They said, 'We're going with you.'" I could probably tell several people here, "I'm going fishing," and they'd say, "I'm going with you." Not everybody, but but anyways, that's what's going on. So they went out immediately and got into the boat, and then and that night they caught nothing. But when morning had now come, Jesus stood on the shore, and yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. And Jesus said unto them, "Children, have you any food?" And they answered him, "No." And he said to them, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." And so they cast, and now they were not able to draw it in because of the multitude of fish. Therefore the disciple that whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." Now when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he had removed it, and plunged into the sea. And the other disciples came in the little boat, and they were not far from the land, but about 200 cubits. How many of you got your cubits with you this morning, by the way? Okay, some of you didn't bring them. Everybody's got one. It's from here to here. That's a cubit. So 200 cubits. Okay, so all right. So dragging the net with fish. And then as soon as they had come to the land, they saw the fire of coals there, and the fish laid on it, and bread. And Jesus said, "Bring some of the fish which you have just caught." And Simon Peter went up to and dragged the net to the land full of large fish, 153. And although they were so many, the net was not broken. And Jesus said to them, "Come and eat breakfast." And yet none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who you are," knowing that it was the Lord. And then when they came, they took bread and gave it to them, and likewise the fish. And now the third time Jesus showed himself to his disciples after he had risen from the dead. So when he had eaten the breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of Jonah." In the King James it says Bar Jonah. So anytime, again, if that word is their name and then Bar whatever, that is Bar Jonah would be son of. And so Abbas would be, Barabbas would be son of the father. Abba would be the father, so Barabbas was just son of the father. But anyways, so when he had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." And he said, "Feed my lambs." And he said to him again the second time, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And he said to him, "Tend my sheep." And he said to him the third time, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Most assuredly I say unto you that when you were younger, you girded yourself and walked." Oh, sorry. I think that's where I wanted to stop. No, I'm going to read through 19. Sorry. All right, yeah, because I got to get this. "Most surely I say unto you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and walked where you wished. But when you were old, you stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish." This he spoke, signifying that the death that he would glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said to him, "Follow me." Got a quick video I want you to watch. So let me catch the lights real quick, and we'll. Maybe.
Grace is God's unmerited favor for us, His crazy love. And the truth is, many times we struggle understanding it. If you find yourself struggling to understand God's grace, don't beat yourself up. Even the disciples struggled with understanding grace.
Jesus, is that you? You're alive. I can't believe you're alive. Okay, I was in the boat and I wasn't catching any fish, okay? But I heard this voice and the voice said, cast your net to the other side. And so I'm thinking, I'm a fisherman. I know what I'm doing, but I'm not catching any fish, you know? And so I throw that net over there and then a gaggle of fish pop into that net and I'm going, this is a total miracle. Who could have done that? I need to know who told me to throw the net to the other side. And boom, I look up and I mean, there is you. You're looking at me on the seashore going, it is I, the Lord, and you're alive. I can't believe you're alive. This is awesome. Andrew, get out of the boat. Come on.
Peter.
Yeah.
Do you love me?
Yes, I love you. I love you. You're alive. This is so great.
Good, then feed my sheep.
Andrew, get out of the boat. Come on, man. It's him.
Peter.
Yeah.
Do you love me?
I love you, yes. And I'm so sorry about that rooster clucking. I had no idea what that meant, but I do now. I'm better for it, all right? Okay?
Then feed my sheep.
Andrew, I'm smiling, but I'm serious. Come on, get out of the boat. It's him.
Peter.
Yeah.
Do you love me?
Jesus, mere words cannot describe the passion that I have for you. I love you. You know everything. I love you.
Good. Good. Then feed my sheep.
I didn't even know you had livestock. That is so like you, though. There's something new about you all the time. That's what I love about you.
Peter.
Yeah.
Do you remember the morning the ladies went to the tomb?
Yeah. We're all in the upper room trying to figure out what to do next, because we thought you were dead. You were dead, We're trying to figure all that out, And Mary comes running up, and Mary's like saying, beehive, beehive, beehive. And I'm thinking, I'm allergic to bees. Like, keep them out. You know what I'm saying? But as she kept getting closer, I heard her correctly. She was saying, he's alive, he's alive, he's alive. And we're going, who's alive, who's alive? And she said, she was at the tomb, and the tomb was empty. And she said that there was an angel there. And the angel said, go tell the disciples and Peter that everything is okay, he is risen. And so me and John, we hightailed it down there. And if John says he beat me, he's totally lying, all right? I beat him, FYI, all right? And we get down there, and I'm looking in that tomb, and it is empty. There's nothing in there, you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, what does this mean? What does this mean? And John is right there. John is so good with words. He should write a book. He is so good with words. And John said, don't you get it, Peter? This is everything Jesus said he was going to do, and you did it, and it's done. Let's go. This is so great.
Wait, the angel said what?
Go tell the disciples and Peter that everything is okay. He is risen. You've risen. Let's go.
He said what?
Go tell the disciples and Peter. Go tell the disciples and Peter. You said my name. Why did you say my name?
Peter, that's grace.
No, I don't deserve that, because that night people kept coming up to me asking me if I belonged to you, if I was with you, and I kept denying you left and right, all right? No, it'll take me my whole life to make up for what I did. It was unforgivable for what I did.
No. What I did on the cross was meant to take what is unforgivable and make it forgivable. That's my grace. It's not about you. It's always about me. That's grace, Peter.
That's grace. Yes. So, after the resurrection, the disciples found themselves at a crossroad. Jesus had appeared to them, proven that he was alive, but now what? They had spent 3 years following him, watching him perform miracles, listening to his teachings, and believing that he would establish God's kingdom. But now everything was different. They didn't understand what was coming next. Peter was kind of the leader of the group. He made a decision. He said, I'm going fishing. And it was not just a casual fishing trip. I think what he was doing was returning to what was familiar to him. This is what he was comfortable with. He didn't know what to do, so he goes back to the old ways. Peter was a fisherman. We can in Luke chapter 5 it talks about that. But now after the weight of his denial and the uncertainty of what to do next, he went back to the life where he knew before Jesus. And like I said, he went back to fishing. And this moment speaks of the human tendency that we all have. You know, when we feel lost, when we're unsure of our purpose, when we're not sure what to do next, when we feel like we've failed, we retreat to what's familiar. We go back to our old habits, to our old way of thinking, sometimes even to the old places where we used to visit, the things that we thought we had left behind. And if you've ever felt failure and wanted to go back to something that was comfortable, that you felt safe in, that's, I think, where Peter was at. He probably thought, you know, I messed up, I blew it, I denied Christ. Maybe I'm not cut out to be this disciple that we've been hearing about. Yet, even in this moment of uncertainty, I love that Jesus met him in a powerful way. Jesus doesn't want to, and he doesn't wait for us to get everything figured out. He comes to us right where we're at, right in the middle of our failure. He'll show up. Right in the middle of everything when we've messed up so bad, and he shows up. He's like, you know what? I got this. Jesus provides and he reveals himself. And with this story progresses, we learn that the disciples had spent the entire night fishing and they caught nothing. They were experienced fishermen. They knew what they were doing. That's what their livelihood was. They knew how to fish. And probably it was a little discouraging, frustrating that they had returned, and even with all their expertise, they come up empty. And that's when Jesus reveals his power and his presence. The sun begins to rise. A voice calls out. He says, "Children, have you caught anything?" The question wasn't because Jesus didn't know, because he already knew. This was more for them. And basically, he's just inviting them to acknowledge their need for him. I've shared this story, but I moved to Oregon. We moved up there. We thought that, in fact, I knew that was the call that God had put on our life. We were supposed to go to Oregon. We went up. We was youth and children's pastors. While we were there, I couldn't find a job. No place I could find a job. Nobody was hiring me. I finally got to the point where it was on a Sunday night, and I prayed and I said, God, you're going to have to do this. I can't do it. I had to get to the point where I couldn't do it anymore. I realized that. And now all of a sudden, that next morning, I get a phone call, and they wanted to hire me. But it wasn't until I gave up and realized that I couldn't do it. I had to have God to do it. And that's exactly what we've got to realize. God will get you to the place where you have to just say, God, I can't do it. You're going to have to fix this. You're going to have to do it because I can't. And that's what we have to do. We have to realize, and that's when, God gave him some instruction. He said, cast the net on the other side of the boat, on the right side. You've been casting it on the wrong side. Cast it on the right side. And that probably seemed unusual. Like I said, what side would it matter? Why would it matter what side that he would cast it on? But in obedience, they did. They did what they were told, and immediately the net was filled. There was so many fish they could hardly drag it in. 153. I don't know the importance of 153. I keep trying to find out, but I haven't ever really found out a definite answer. But it had to be some reason, because they mentioned 153. I'll have to do a little more studying on that. But that's what we see here, that they caught that many. And that's when John's eyes were opened. And he said, "It's the Lord." Oh, this is familiar. I recognize who this is now. And he recognized what was going on. And we can, again, go back to Luke chapter 5. And that's when Jesus first called Peter, James, and John from the sailboat. And it wasn't a coincidence Jesus was just revealing himself, and he was revealing it in an act of provision for them. And then I love Peter's reaction because it was immediate and it was passionate. The moment that he realized it was Jesus, he couldn't contain himself anymore. He put on his clothes and he jumped in the water. and he went after him, So he goes out there, gets to Jesus as fast as he can, and Peter wasn't just about, he wasn't even worried about the miraculous catch. It was about Jesus, the one that had called him, the one that he had denied, the one that was now standing there on the shore waiting for him. When the rest of the disciples got to shore, they realized that Jesus had already prepared a meal for them. He told them to bring their fish, but what I'm reading, he already had it all ready for him. It was already there. He didn't even need their help. Had bread and fish on the fire. And that just kind of shows me again how much Jesus loves us. He wasn't just providing for their physical needs, he was also welcoming them back to have that fellowship with him. One thing that they would do is to show that you were close to somebody, you wanted to be friends with them, you had a meal with them. That helped. That was what you did. And so, again, I'm just going to throw it out there. Go have dinner with somebody. That is a great way to have fellowship, and it just shows you're at peace with them, and that you're just wanting to spend time with them. So, and that's what Jesus was doing again, and he's already invited them to sit down and eat, and Peter, the disciples, their ordinary routine, their everyday lives, and yet Jesus calls them. He provides for them. He reveals himself to the way that they didn't expect him to. So again, even looking back to last week, are we going to recognize when Jesus is with us? Are we going to see that and know that he's there? Or are we going to miss it? Will we humble ourselves and receive him and receive everything that the Father has for us, the healing, the love that he has for us? And then we look at the restoration of Peter here. After breakfast, Jesus turns his attention to Peter. We bear witness of one of the most intentional and yet restorative conversations that have ever occurred in the Bible. He says, Simon, son of Jonah. Didn't call him Peter. Called him Simon. Again, just to remind you, that word Simon, the name Simon is like it was the reeds in the water where the gun kind of go back and forth and they're wishy and washy, and yet he changed his name to Peter or Petra, the part of the rock, the solid, and he went from being wishy-washy to solid. That's what his desire for him was. And yet, when trouble came, Peter went back to his old ways. He became Simon again. And he called him that. He said, Simon, son of Jonah, or son of John, do you love me more than these? Jesus addressing Peter by his full name, just like he did when he first called him. It wasn't about Peter's affection. It was about his commitment. There are a lot of scholars that believe it was when he said, do you love me more than these? He was referring to the other disciples. He said, do you love me more than the other disciples do? I don't agree with that. I think what he was saying is, do you love me more than these? More than your fishing? Because the thing you went back to, that's what I think it was. Do you love me more, or are you going to stay with me, or are you going to go back to your old ways? You're going to go back to what was comfortable, what was easy. Is that what you're going to do? Are you going back to the life that you once knew? 3 times Jesus asked him, do you love me? And 3 times he responded, Lord, you know I love you. And every time Jesus commanded him, he said, feed my lambs, tend my sheep. feed my sheep. Why 3 times? Well, I think it's because Peter denied him 3 times. Just my opinion. But that's, I don't think it was a coincidence. I think it was just grace in action. His grace that was, with each question, Jesus is undoing Peter's failure and reaffirming that and not trying to shame him. He wasn't trying to shame him with that. He was just trying to reaffirm, hey, do you love me? I just want to make sure. Peter's denial had been in public, so his restoration was too. First time, Peter answered confidently, but by the third time, that says that he was grieved. And I think probably it's because he felt the weight of his past mistake. And like I said, Jesus wasn't trying to shame him. He wasn't trying to make him feel bad. He was trying to bring him to a place of healing, a place where he could move forward and get past what that past, to move forward, not be stuck feeling guilty about what he had done. I guarantee that he thought about that often. And again, it wasn't Jesus reminding him. It was Satan that keeps reminding him, probably all throughout his life, you denied Christ. And all he would have to do is say, I did, but he forgave me. When Satan throws things against you and you remind you that you failed and you messed up, just remember that Jesus forgave us. So, again, he's wanting to bring him to a place of healing. Peter's love was real, but Jesus wanted him to see that there was also a deeper calling. He said, in verse 15, he said, feed my lambs. In verse 16, he said, tend my sheep. In verse 17, he said, feed my sheep. Jesus was making it clear. Peter's story wasn't over. His failure didn't define him. His calling defined him. Think about this. What did Jesus call Peter to do at the very beginning? To be what? A fisher of men. Now all of a sudden, he's changed it. In your walk with God, you start out being saved. But then God says, hey, I want you to become more. Now he said, I want you to be a shepherd. I want you to love people. I want you to love people that you normally wouldn't love. I want you to be a shepherd. I want you to take on a different role. Not just go out and win the lost, but be a disciple. Be somebody that teaches, that helps them to become more than what they were. So his failure didn't define him. His calling defined him. And Peter's restoration reminds us of a few things. Jesus doesn't give up on us. Even when we fall short, he calls us back. In Lamentations chapter 3, verse 22, let's look at this real quick. Through the Lord's mercies we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. Wow. They're new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. They're new every morning. He says, I'm not going to consume you. I'm not going to give up on you. I'm not going to just throw you away. I've got my faithfulness. My love for you is new every morning. Wow. And the love for Jesus leads to action. We could read 1 John 3:18, but if we love him, we're called to serve others. And that's part of that. Feed my lambs, feed my sheep. Take care of them. And God uses our failures for his glory. What did Peter become? He became one of the pillars of the early church. Not in spite of his past, but because of God's redemption. Because God brought him back. God restored him. We see that in Acts chapter 2. You can read that as verse 14 through 41. That's where he gets out and he says, these are not drunk as you suppose. He goes on and he talks about that, and he tells them everything that happened. And then it's, at the last verse it says, and about 3,000 were saved. Wow. Talk about redemption. Talk about bringing somebody back. God uses our failures for his glory. So if you ever felt like you messed up too badly for God to use you, I guarantee Peter felt that way. We're made strong in our weakness. That's true. But Jesus is in the business of restoration. He doesn't define us at our worst moments. He calls us forward in his love. So, after restoring Peter, Jesus gave him a glimpse of his future. Not going to be easy, Peter. Peter one day would have to give up his life for the gospel. But Jesus' final words to him were powerful and simple. Follow me. Peter's story is probably like a lot of our stories. We've all failed in some way. We've all messed up in some way. We've done things that we shouldn't have. We've doubted. We've stumbled. We've turned away. I am so glad that Jesus doesn't cast us aside when we mess up. He restores us. He calls us to serve him. And we don't do it out of duty, but we do it out of love. To restore something is to bring it back to its original state or better. When they restore a car, what do they usually do? They upgrade the front end. They upgrade the engine. They have new seats. Probably upgrade the stereo system. How many of you would like to have an 8-track or the Bluetooth? I would, Bluetooth, much better. I always thought it was real impressive when we went from 8 tracks to cassettes. That was cool. I did not have a 4-track. But then we went to the CDs, and that was impressive. And then the MP3s, and now the Bluetooth, and XM, and everything else. But anyways, I didn't know they still had AM radio until the other day. No, just kidding. I just can't hardly pick it up. I've tried. I was wanting to listen to some news, and I thought, oh, AM, that's got it. And I can't hardly pick it up. But anyways. But that's how Jesus does, though. He restores us. He calls us to serve him, and we do it out of love. Our failures do not disqualify us from God's mission. I am so glad that my failures in the past have not disqualified me for what God has called me to do. The Bible says that the gifts and callings of God are without repentance. That means God doesn't say, you know what, you messed up so bad that I'm not going to use you anymore. He says they're without repentance. That means I'm not giving up. I'm not letting it go. You still have a calling on your life. Thank God. So, he doesn't cast us away. He simply restores us. He meets us where we are. He transforms our brokenness with his grace. And he calls us to move forward in his love. Today's passage reminds us that Jesus is that's all right. Oh, I just have to have this so they can hear me on the whatever Facebook Live. All right. It's for what? Oh, okay. 153 stands for I'm God in Elohim. Interesting. All right. Um, so, like I said, God doesn't need perfect people. Thank goodness He doesn't need perfect people. He just needs willing people. People that are willing to follow Him. That can forsake all others. Find His greater purpose. And Peter's calling, that's our calling too. To love Jesus, to show Jesus' love to others, to share the gospel. We do that by being His hands and feet. We do that to a world that desperately needs Him. Jesus' final words to Peter was the same that He spoke at the very beginning, follow me. He let him know, I haven't given up, keep following me. This is the call that continues today. Jesus meets us, He restores us, He calls us to follow Him. What's that look like? Well, we'll look at that maybe next week. I don't know, it's Mother's Day. It makes it hard for me to keep this going. But because being restored by Jesus is just the beginning. Once we're restored, that's just the beginning. We need we're called to go into all the world and preach the gospel, to make disciples, to share the love to the world. Not always easy. But the question we have to ask is, how am I going to respond? Am I going to go back to what's familiar? Am I going to go back to when trials come, when things happen, when bad things happen? Am I going to go back to what was familiar? Am I going to go back to fishing? Or am I going to move forward and continue to do what God has called me to do, to follow Him? That's what we have to ask ourselves today. So this morning, if you're here and you say, Pastor, I've kind of messed up sometimes in my life too. Maybe you're not where you need to be. Today's a great day to change that. Don't wait till next week or next month or next year, because you may not be here next week or next month or next year. And He could return. I'm expecting Him to return at any day. We were just talking about that before service. I was talking to Brother Dale, and he said, well, I hope that I can make it through this, and all this stuff. And as we were talking, I'm like, yeah, but the great thing is we don't have to be here when it comes to that after Jesus returns, and we don't have to worry about giving our life for Him, because we've already made that commitment to Him, and we'll be gone. Thank goodness we don't have to go through the great tribulation. That would be a bummer. But the only way you can assure that you've got that ticket is to make sure that your life is right with Christ today. Because, again, not all of us are going to live to be 102 like Miss Nick. We don't have tomorrow. Not for certain. We've got today. So I want to challenge you. Make sure that your life is right with Christ. And if you need to make that decision to get your life straightened out, I'd be happy to pray with you. But maybe you could also say, you know what, Pastor, I've failed, I've messed up, I've done things that I shouldn't do. I need to get that life straightened out too. Today's the day to do that. And I guarantee that all of us at some point have messed up. We need to just make sure. Paul said, I die daily. When he dies daily, he said, what basically he was saying, I'm going and I'm asking God to forgive me every day, because I mess up every day. The old story of the guy that said, God, I haven't yelled at anybody, I haven't done anything bad, I haven't cussed, I haven't had any bad thoughts even, but I'm fixing to get out of bed, and so from here on out, you're going to have to help me. That's how I am every day. I've got to have God's help to make it through, because I'm going to mess up. And I need to be like Paul and die daily. God, forgive me. Help me not to have that attitude anymore. Help me not to say those things. Help me not to be that way. whatever it may be. That's what we need to do. So today, let's just talk to God for a little bit. Now, again, if you're here and you need prayer, I'd be happy to pray with you. And we'll just move forward. But I think it'd be good to just take some time and talk to God. Let's find a place and pray.